In this module, I'll describe each of the 5 critical leadership conversations, and I'll describe why they're so critical. A summary of this module is available in your course guide. The first critical leadership conversation is communicating change. But what makes communicating change so critical? We know that one constant in life is change. But the global pandemic of 2020 showed us that the nature of change in our workplaces and in the greater world of work is something that we just can't predict. 2020 also showed us how successful organizations adapt and grow when faced with change. As leaders and experts in your organizations, understanding 2 core principles of change management will help you communicate change. The first core principle of change management is that there's no one who is completely change resistant. This means that there's no one person who resists all changes. Now you might say, hold on, I don't like change. But that's not really true, is it? Maybe you'd like to make more money, maybe just a little or maybe a lot. Well, that's a change. And maybe there's someone in the workplace who's never supported you. Wouldn't it be great if that changed too? So you're not change resistant. You only resist certain changes. And that brings us to the second core principle of change management. Resistance to change is the result of experiencing a loss. When we try to understand what loss someone is experiencing, we immediately impact how we talk about change. And I'll be doing that later in this course when I demonstrate the 5-step method for having this critical leadership conversation. Now let's look at the second critical leadership conversation, providing direct support. How often does someone on your team ask for help? Well, if it doesn't happen every day, it probably happens at least once per week. And when they ask for help, hopefully you have enough time to coach or mentor them so they can solve the problem themselves. But in a high-risk situation, or if you don't have a lot of time, you might have to tell them exactly what to do. When you're providing that kind of direct support, you want to make sure that your direction is clear and the person you're providing direction to is committed to following through. You also want to ensure that when you're providing direct support, you're transferring knowledge and skill. This is important because if a similar situation arises in the future, you want your team to be able to solve problems without coming to you for help again. And that's what makes providing direct support a critical leadership conversation. Now let's look at our third critical leadership conversation, resolving conflict. You've probably heard that some conflict in the workplace is helpful because it causes us to check our assumptions and biases, to challenge the status quo, and it can be the fertile ground for innovation. But there's a growing body of research that shows that conflict with these kinds of positive outcomes is only possible when some very specific criteria are met. Most conflict in our workplaces is destructive, or at best, neutral. If high performance and innovation are going to happen, then interpersonal relationships must be maintained at some level of respect and productivity. Now, conflict resolution is a discipline and profession unto itself. But every leader can resolve some level of conflict. And when you help someone resolve conflict, you're having a critical leadership conversation. Now let's look at our fourth critical leadership conversation, improving performance. Honest and direct performance improvement conversations are the conversations that most leaders are uncomfortable with. And in my experience, these are also the conversations that new leaders avoid the most. Now, the discomfort with these conversations might come from the fact that we usually don't have them every day. And by the time we have the conversation, a person's performance has degraded to the point where it's causing all kinds of negative emotions in the team or perhaps in the entire organization. When you realize that performance improvement conversations are the very conversations you should be having early and often, you see how you can normalize performance improvement, become more comfortable with the conversation, become really good at it, and contribute to the well-being of every person whose performance, well, from time to time, needs a little boost. Now let's look at the last critical leadership conversation, acknowledging contribution. Acknowledging contribution might be the conversation you're already having the most. And you know it's an important conversation. But it's also a conversation that needs to proceed in a way that makes the other person feel truly appreciated and motivates them to keep performing at a high level. Acknowledging contribution is different than thanking someone. When we acknowledge contribution, we directly connect what someone did with the contribution that it made. And I'll show you how powerful this can be when I demonstrate how to apply the 5 steps to the 5 critical leadership conversations. Again, the 5 critical leadership conversations are communicating change, providing direct support, resolving conflict, improving performance, and acknowledging contribution. Now it's time to understand the importance of following a method to have these conversations. And that's in the next module. I'll see you there.